right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole? This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. Now live. Tuesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Para X Radio Network.
Hello and welcome to Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole. This is your host, Jason M. Colwell, with this week's co-host, James Stovall, a.k.a. Shaman Jim, a.k.a. Two Snakes, a.k.a. whatever alias you prefer. How you doing tonight, Jim?
Good, Well, it is National Talk Like a Pirate Day, so I suppose I could come up with a pirate name or something.
Is it really? And I didn't stop and get any Arby's.
No, we could do the whole broadcast this way, but everybody would tune out immediately.
Well, folks, I want to apologize. We got a little bit of late start on the network tonight. I was preparing for tonight's show, and I had a major update on my Windows PC. Well, lo and behold, I thought I had that all taken care of. I got a hold of Jim. My audio was destroyed. I tried to do a fast reboot. I had to do a whole nother Windows update. So tonight's been real, let me tell you. But
I like how you say destroyed. My audio was destroyed. It was very epic that way.
Well, it was. I thought I had it all under control. Let's just say 23-23. Okay, so I just want to do a couple quick announcements. I want to remind everyone, because we're at the mid-month mark, actually getting toward the end of the month. If you want to take part in this particular Do Magic Beginner's Mind Challenge, go to domagicwithak.com, because you could start the Beginner's Mind Challenge anytime in the month of September. You have about 10 days left to begin. Do you have anything you need to throw in this week, Jim?
Announcement-wise, I suppose, since this is the only time I'll be on this month, I'm going to be appearing at a small psychic fair outside of Jackson, at Unity Church of Jackson. It's a holistic and spiritual fair. I'll be there on Saturday, September 30th, and I'll be doing shamanic cleansings and healing work. I don't normally go out and do big intensives like that. And I don't know, maybe I just throw it out there and be all political. I submitted a couple classes to Convocation this year, and as you guys know, last year was the first year I'd been back to Convocation in a while. And so I submitted a couple classes, the Talking Stick, which went really well last year, and also a class and ritual outline for how to find your shamanic spirit guide. And if you are interested in attending those classes, if you got any pull with Convocation, give them a shout, pressure them, let them know, send them a Facebook message and let them know you want those classes in there.
Well, there you go. Back to the public speaking regiment.
Yeah,
Good job,
that's right.
Man.
Yeah, well, I theoretically have more free time now, although I'm not feeling it.
Funny, you'll always find something to do.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, that being said, I think tonight you've brought a guest with you who, this could be a bit of a controversial topic. I can hear people crying in the background as we speak.
Yeah, let the wailing and gnashing of teeth begin. Our guest tonight, Daniel Moeller, is a writer, artist, and educator, alchemist, shamanist, and student of life. He's got a master's degree in liberal arts. He's taught art, literature, philosophy. He's published fiction and nonfiction. And one book I'm looking forward to, we're going to have him back on the show, I think, in 2018. He's going to have a book out on shamanic Kabbalah published by Llewellyn. But he's on tonight to talk to us about a very special topic and article that he wrote. So he and I have a similar background in some of our spiritual training, and so I was really interested in having him on tonight. So welcome to Deeper Down the Rabbit Hole, Daniel Moeller.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm awesome. Ready to get going.
Yeah. Well, you know, Skype waits for no man. No, that's not. So, give us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. I gave a very brief bio there, but there's always more to be said. Tell us a little bit more about what it is you do and about your spiritual path.
Well, I think my main pathway, I consider myself mostly interfaith, but my main practice is as a sanctioned teacher in the Pachacuti Mesa tradition, which is a Peruvian, well, it's a cross-cultural shamanic tradition that was brought to the U.S. by a Peruvian curandero named Don Oscar Miro Casada, as you know. And Don Oscar, though the Pachacuti Mesa tradition has Peruvian roots, when he brought it to the U.S., he really sought to create a paradigm that would really make sense to us Westerners. Because, you know, we may think we can understand Indian concepts and cosmology, but, you know, the indigenous mindset we're so separate from. And so with his background in psychology, that was quite the fun challenge for him to be able to bring that here. So that's my main shtick. I mean, I could go on and on and on. When you asked that, I first had a pause and was like, whoa, that's a loaded question.
Yeah, I understand. I was looking through your biography, and my teacher also studied with Oscar and also with Alberto. And so I understand we have a lot of commonality in our practice. So I was kind of excited about that. Yes,
we do. It's very interesting that there's so much interest in the Peruvian lineages right now, and I think what a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of variety in the Peruvian lineages as well, and they're as varied as any family that would come out of any of those traditions, because it changes from generation to generation.
Yeah, from practitioner to practitioner. You know, although we have similar backgrounds, I know that our paths are similar in a lot of ways, but they're also different just based on our locations. I tend to work a lot with the Great Lakes and those energies, and so my traditions would be slightly different from yours. And so, you know, and just like you down in the mountains, they'd be different from village to village, from family to family. So, you know, it's really interesting to me that those kinds of differences are not discouraged, they're encouraged, and it's all a matter of what's effective and what works.
Right. I think that's actually how the shamanic traditions have survived throughout time, through the conquistadors and other various types of colonialization and genocide. They've learned to adapt through the ages. So I understand what you mean. Working with the Great Lakes, and in Peru they work with the mountains. Here, I mean, I'm in Kansas. We work with the plains. You know, and we have a great river running through, and those are the, you know, it all depends on the land that you're on and spirits that you're working with. And what
so you're in Kansas. Do you get to work with the tree sometimes?
The one tree. Everyone, yeah. There's actually more trees than you might think in Kansas, and we do have hills. By God, they are here.
That was a joke. You know, I honestly believed that though when I was a kid, because we did go driving through Kansas one time, and it was just corn. Oh, hey, there's a tree.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, just ribbing you a little bit there.
No, totally.
I think we're going to have to do a trade-off sometime, Daniel. I think one of these times we're going to figure out a way for me to come down there and for you to come up here, and we can experience the different rituals and see how the energies affect things differently.
Oh, that would be fascinating. I love, you know, mixing things up and getting new people in here in the area and going to other places. So I will take you up on that, brother.
So let me ask, do you have students yourself?
Yeah, so actually this October, my beloved Autumn and I, she's a sanctioned teacher in this tradition as well, we're beginning an apprenticeship. Our apprenticeships usually last a year long, and they generally run anywhere from 20 to 30 students. And so we normally, as students get through the apprenticeship experience, we stay connected as a community. We have regular rituals, most especially we do solstice and equinoxes, but once a month we get together to just celebrate and ceremony together. And once a year we actually have a big old festival that we put on for like a day-long ceremony. So yeah, it's a very strong community we have here in Kansas City.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, your students are so lucky.
Okay.
My poor students. I've got of my elder generation of students. I've got 3 of them, but they've been towing along with me for about 5 years now. So we're in it for the long haul. What can I say?
Oh, those are the ones with the real grit, right?
Yeah, that's right. You got that right. So the reason that we were having you on tonight was an article that you wrote, and it was that nobody owns the word shaman, and that intrigued me a little bit because I could just hear the response from so many people. So I will turn this over to you so you can speak about this in your own words.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yeah, I know for a fact there's probably a lot of people going, uh-oh, and getting their seatbelts on for this.
Yeah, we're expecting the hate mail. I'll be disappointed if we don't get any.
Right. So this article, I originally titled it apropos for appropriation, and the people that I submitted it to, nobody liked that title, and everybody changed it. Every person who printed it changed the title to what they wanted, which is fine. It was printed in the UK in Sacred Hoot magazine and printed online with the Tattooed Buddha, which is a great online community centered out of here, the U.S. And it came from the experiences that I've had with various communities, and there is a strong contingent of, I would say, a segment of the Northern Native American communities that are very resistant to any gringo or white man using the word shaman and working the old ways and working the mystery traditions, or whatever you want to call it, the craft, especially when it looks anything like what their earth honoring ceremonies look like. And I'll caveat that with, I have a lot of good relations with a lot of the Northern Native American communities as well. So it's just a small contingent that seem to get pretty upset when anything is put out there. And I think that this particular article was in response to a men's group that I was hosting that I called Sun Lodge. And it was only meant to be a lodge in the sense that we're men, we're going to come together, we're going to honor the sun within us, the moon being that aspect of the feminine, the sun, which I call Inti Taita, is that aspect of the masculine that we wanted to honor. And I only use the word lodge in the sense of we're gathering together in a space, a lodge. And there was this small contingent that took it to mean a Nipi, a Lakota sweat lodge. And I had some verbiage in there just saying that we were going to do some shamanic ceremony, and that was it. And they went off and on about my adept skills of appropriation.
I just want to say, those sirens, that was the butthurt beginning. But go on.
I was going to say, here we go. I started looking over my shoulder.
Terrible.
It's just sage burning right now, I swear. So anyway, they started throwing comments at me. They started throwing a lot of hate mail at me about white man using the word shaman, stealing the native ways, and so on and so forth. And this has really bothered me. I had a lot of conversations with my particular teachers, and I've always been told to just let it go, let it go, let it go. but I'm a writer and I'm a loudmouth. I really don't like to let things. My wife, I when I have a point, I need to get it across, especially stem from the fact that the word shaman, which they kept saying that we were stealing, the word shaman is not a Lakota word. It is not a Pakakuna word. It is not a word that actually belongs in any indigenous tradition, especially here in the Americas. It's a word that's rooted from the Tungus peoples of northern Siberia, and even the word that we use today is actually a bastardized word at that of the original term. And so, if anything, because of its bastardization and the way it's evolved over time, it's actually a very Western Caucasian term, to put it lightly. And that's okay. It's not about anyone owning any kind of terms. It's just about having some sort of definition as to what we want to call it, whatever it is that we do, and whatever it is that these particular traditions do, whether it be their witch doctor, their medicine woman or medicine man, their curandero, their ayahuasquero, having a generic term to kind of befit that label for tradition, which exists across the planet, I think is a fine idea. So
and it's funny because so many of our words in English are borrowed from other cultures, other languages. We don't have a lot of descriptive words for these acts. We really don't.
Right. Yeah, you can use all kinds of things like trance or ecstasy, psychopomp, but all of that still doesn't fit within the kind of banner that we're looking for the definition of shaman. But that's all language. I mean, if people want to get into the ownership of a certain word, this is why I love actually the traditions in Peru so much, because the shamanic traditions in Peru really found a way to adapt over time and assimilate what worked from the invading forces, so that their traditions could survive, but also let it grow, let it evolve, let it change. And that's the way that their language is. I mean, you go down to the Sacred Valley, and there are many people that are talking a mix of Castellano, which is Spanish, and Quechua at the same time. It intermingles, and the words begin to change and blend over time. I mean, you can't take a how to talk in Spanish book to Peru and start using that as your way to talk, because everybody has their own local dialects as well. I actually tried that once, and I got laughed at. I got laughed at by our guide, who said, "It sounds like you're reading from some elementary school book. Stop talking that way." Okay, I'll listen and learn then.
That's actually a really good point. What you're saying about Peru too, because it always struck me like the use of the chakra system and modality, which obviously is not the mindset, the modality, the words that they would use to express things, but when they were exposed to that system, it kind of became, oh, that's what you're going to call it? Okay, that's fine. That's what we'll call it too. It was one of those very adaptable sort of things.
Right.
See,
right.
Isn't it funny? And from what you've told me, Jim, your experience with the Peruvian shamanism, they borrow, they adapt, they explain things in terms that people that they're teaching would understand. So yeah, it's really going round robin here, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And it makes sense that would express to the language as well. But you make an interesting point, Daniel. It's funny because our experiences are a little bit different, because for the Native Americans that I have met and friends with in this area, they would really balk at being called shaman. They would not want that term applied to them at all, by and large.
Yeah. Well, there's a stigma about anyone labeling themselves as a shaman.
Well, this is true.
One should never ever label themselves a shaman because of the weight that title carries. That's a title that should be bestowed upon one by an elder. But then again, in the Northern Native American traditions, there's no the word shaman doesn't exist.
Correct.
It's a new word. It's a Western term. So yeah.
So what kind of feedback have you gotten on this article?
Well, just the usual palaver of white man stealing the native ways, so to speak. I think that, being one of the things I've been called frequently is a Twinkie. I believe that's the word that they call for Caucasians who are trying to act native. And I have a teacher in the Lakota tradition, and I carry a sacred pipe. I don't mean any disrespect in the Northern Native American traditions at all. It's an incredible earth honoring path, and one that I don't take lightly and I take very seriously. But I don't like to throw that out there too much. I don't like to carry myself as a person who's trying to replicate the native ways at all. I mean, one thing my students can probably distinguish me from someone else who teaches these kinds of things is I'm kind of just your regular blue jeans, t-shirt wearing kind of Joe. I'm just me. I don't claim any one path necessarily. I'm interfaith and I'm Daniel. If people keep asking me, what am I? People try to get labels out of you. They like to get titles, and I would rather just be Daniel, and we'll just kind of carry this relationship forward however it is. I have my interactions with the natural world and the unseen, and we can label that if you want. But I am who I am. So it always kind of goes back to, and I think this actually leads to the conversation, James, you and I are having on a thread that you posted one time, where if anything, I would choose the shamanist, the word shamanist, and I know that a lot of people to have little, sometimes light bulbs, sometimes broken light bulbs pop up above their head, but I appreciate the term shaman, and I don't mind calling myself that because it denotes the concept and idea of being a student of a certain art form or philosophy, just as someone who's a student of Plato would call themselves a Platonist. I'm a student of this particular path. I don't claim the title of shaman in any way, shape, or form. But I certainly will claim my right to be a student of this particular art form that has existed for centuries. And there's actually a movement to use that term pretty heavily in the world of core shamanism that kind of Michael Harner and Sandra Ingerman started.
Right.
Hank Wesselman, in his most recent book, The Reenchantment, which is actually fabulous, and it is a great book. I have a lot of respect for Hank Wesselman. Calls forth the proclamation for people to start using that term pretty heavily.
So the idea is that shamanist would be a little bit more disarming and something that is more neutral and acceptable.
And something that I think that is accessible to people. I think that, language is powerful. I do understand that. I mean, it certainly, and the way that I painted the word shaman before as just being some kind of bastardization from the Western world, language does carry a lot of weight. It creates a reality. I mean, everybody that is listening right now, when they hear the word shaman, they are getting a very distinct image in their head. It may be different, but the word shamanist is something that is a little bit more approachable. It's something that I think kind of opens the doors for something that can be learned, like a school. I always like to be at school. I'm a big school nut, and I think that that's the way the world of shamanism should be. Open doors, and whoever is willing to learn, to come on in and take part.
That does make sense. I mean, I think I've shared on this show before, and possibly in chats and that we've had, that I struggle with the use of the word shaman. Even the title that I used for this show was one that was dubbed to me Shaman Jim, and there are times where I really struggle with that because I don't feel it paints an accurate picture of who I am or what I'm trying to be. So I can really appreciate where you're coming from. The only advantage that it has is being a word that is so universal. It's a quick way of describing what it is in a thumbnail way in order to find the people that, or for the people that need you to find you.
Right.
So it's one of those catch-22s.
I guess what gets me, it's in my head, I look at guys like you two who have gone out and pursued a standing tradition, and to me it's been handed down to you. The training has been bestowed to you, as opposed to other people I see out there who go out and study some hypnosis and deem themselves a shaman.
Mm-hmm.
It's just different to me, that those who have a standing tradition versus those who just deem themselves a certain thing.
There is a broad stroke that term has created throughout our culture, and I even remember a movie, and I was trying to conjure the image of it before you guys called. I just remember Ben Affleck was in it, and he was getting some guy high, and he was taking them to the house where they were getting high, and he was calling the dude a shaman that was giving them a giant bong.
Right. Oh my God. Yeah.
And and I've heard the term used in that way for just any kind of like trance sort of ecstatic delivery of an experience, and I do abhor that broad usage. I ascribe to Dr. Roger Walsh's definition of shamanism, which he has a book called The World of Shamanism, and he spent almost a whole chapter trying to find a very precise definition for what this is. And it's not a religion, and it's not just getting into an altered state. He defines it very distinctly as a family of traditions whose practitioners voluntarily enter those altered states of consciousness, in which they are interacting with other spirits or entities, often by traveling to other realms in order to serve the community. And that's the key factor right there. Mm-hmm. It's being schooled and skilled at being able to journey into an altered state of consciousness and interact with another intelligence, and skilled enough to be able to get good, viable, tangible information that you can bring back and apply to serving someone else. And that's a key component. Service, I feel, in the way that I've been taught in my tradition, is an integral part of the definition of what a shaman is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It's several people that I'm friends with, we've all had these conversations, and it's that service to community. Now, the part that I found that was kind of interesting, and I don't know if you've ever considered this, Daniel, is that sometimes our community we serve as people, and sometimes it's the spirit themselves, but it's all community. But unless you're serving someone else, it's not really shamanism to a very large degree.
Yes, in the northern coastal curandero tradition of Peru, where they practice a more mestizo form of shamanic practice of curandismo, they call that sorcery. If you're not in service, it's a brujeria. You're a sorcerer. You're usually then doing it for some sort of self-service, and that's not what we should be in the business of. So
yeah, I think I've always defined my definition of shaman versus like a witch or a sorcerer is either A, you're not serving anyone other than yourself, or B, you're from the next village over. We always say that my village's person is a shaman, the next village is over person's a witch, of course, obviously.
Right. I also think what's very important too is you can pretty much point out a pretty adept shamanic practitioner by the rapport that they have with the unseen realm, with natural spirits of the land and other spirits and entities. it's being able to establish that sacred trust with the natural world is what creates the prestige within some of the more adept shamanic practitioners that I know that I've interacted with. I mean, that's their whole goal, is to be an emissary, to be an ambassador between the community and the unknown. In the traditional, in a lot of traditional indigenous cultures, in the village, the shaman was very rarely living inside of the village amongst the people. The shaman was very likely to be living on the outskirts, in the frontier, in the boundary, being that kind of buffer between the unknown and gaining information from the unknown to take back into the community.
So let me ask you a question. You had brought up earlier about the movie, the media perception that, the shaman is the drug dealer sort of thing. And one of your books actually has to do a lot with the San Pedro cactus, which is not a plant spirit helper that I have any experience with personally. So that's one place that our paths are a little bit different. So I'm curious about that. How important was that work to your overall path? And can you tell me a little bit more about that? Was that part of something that happened along the way? Was that the big thing that opened the door for you? How would you describe that work?
Well, let me start off by saying that the Pachacuti Mesa tradition itself, in our official capacity of teaching apprenticeships, in no way, shape, or form we associate with plant medicines. But it just so happens that my particular...
Are you sure? I mean, I know I get questions about ayahuasca about every other afternoon, so...
I mean, there are associations in terms of the lineage, but in the terms of our us officially bringing that out into the world through Don Oscar.
Right. No, I'm just joshing you. I understand.
Okay. The lawyer in me started coming out then. There are people listening. So
what?
There are people listening, I said. But my apprenticeship, my personal apprenticeship in the curandero arts, working with San Pedro, happened to arrive at the same time that I came into the Pachacuti Mesa tradition, because they actually, in the history of the lineage, they do, they are correlated very strongly, because working with San Pedro is very interrelated with working with an open mesa in the northern tradition. So San Pedro is, for those that may not know, listening in the audience, is a sacrament, a medicine that is used in Peru. And in terms of the agent that is used within that cactus is actually very similar to peyote of the northern Native American. So it is that same type of mescaline content, and the experience with San Pedro has actually been very life-changing, and I am constantly in apprenticeship with the spirit of San Pedro. And so you talk about, the shaman as drug peddler and all that, just because someone, again, is entering an altered state of consciousness, in no way, shape, or form means that they are walking the shamanic walk.
Exactly.
Right. In order for me to have a successful session working with San Pedro, I have to have a relationship with the spirit that resides within that plant. And frankly, in the past, when I worked with it especially, it completely transformed my life. At one point, I was diagnosed with PTSD. There are people that are still around in our community that could attest to the fact that I couldn't even hug another person, let alone shake their hand. Going into it for people completely would make me vomit. And now I'm a teacher, I'm a hugger, and I owe a lot of that to my my mentor, the curandero, who spent a decade training me in that particular tradition and to the spirits that resides within that plant. In Peru, it is known as Saint Pedro, Saint Peter, who holds the keys to heaven. But in the very traditional sense, it's known as a Wachuma. That's the Quechua word for that particular spirit.
Oh wow, nice.
So, yeah, it's and you said you mentioned a book, and my very first experience encountering San Pedro is in Ross Heaven's book, Cactus of Mystery. And I actually wrote what you mentioned, the kind of drug culture, and I actually wrote the first book on Terence McKenna that came into publication, Machinel's 101, who is kind of a big contributor in just the free form style use of drug use in modern culture. So there is kind of a paradox there.
I just think it's interesting that, here we are with a word like shaman, where it is such a wide-ranging word, where you've got people that are really, literally associating it with doing nothing more than taking very selfish trips and wasting the plant spirit, not honoring it or respecting it all, and then you got the full circle to people that take it so overly serious that they can't handle anyone actually using the word, and it's strange how it's such a wide circle of grasps on this one word.
It's a double-edged sword, because there are people that just want to jump into working with plant medicines, and they think they're going to be able to just take a trip to Peru and have a session with ayahuasca and come back no longer being an alcoholic or abusive or what have you. And more often than not, it does not work that way. In order to apprentice with the plant spirits, it is a skill that takes time and patience. You have to have a mentor from a very strong tradition and lineage that puts you through rigorous training that is very honest and oftentimes brutal to get you to a pristine place, so that that you're not just getting off, so to speak, or having a high, but that you are working, that you are in this relationship with the plant spirit to serve and to be a service to it and to the community. Then you have, on the other side of that, you have people that are hyper dependent upon doing as much plant medicine as possible.
Right.
And more often than not, anytime anybody comes in and keeps asking if there's going to be a medicine session coming up soon, I end up pushing it off more and more and more, because the more and more that you feel like that you need that, then the plant spirits don't want you hyper dependent upon them either. They don't want you making a crutch out of them. The point is to create resilience, and you being able to walk just fine in your life without needing that at all.
I always figure it's a matter of coming to the spirits clean, and to my students, I always tell them about obvious things like bathing, clean clothes, making a good presentation for the spirits. But a lot of that coming to the spirits clean also means clean of intents or agendas, or that you have to come with a more pure and honest heart and spirit in order to get the most out of this work.
Yeah,
and that's with San Pedro or not. And when you factor in plant spirit helpers, the shamanic path and trials, they can literally lead to some really bad places, and not everyone passes those trials, and so you got to take it seriously. I don't know, it's one of those little things that gets under my skin sometimes.
No, I agree. One of the things that I was taught is that the core aspect of training is really to build solid character, and you can't be flitting in and out of the work, being a seeker, and just trying to jump from one thing to another. The goal is to get a human being focused and to get them to buckle down and work on the things in their lives, so to speak, to kind of surface those things that we don't normally acknowledge about ourselves, to get those things out of the way, so we can be stewards to everyone in our lives and stewards to the earth, and reestablish that sacred trust with the planet again. And that's one of the reasons why we've gone so awry as a species. We're completely out of control, and we're completely unaware of the damage that we're doing. Most of the time, it's not people just being evil, they're just unaware. And so you need to become aware, you need to become focused. And the medicine sessions that I've been a part of that were the most pristine were the ones where the ayahuasca or curandero didn't just let people flit off into the cosmos and travel to multiple Pleiadian societies from past, present, and future, but to keep them here, present on keep them grounded, and to ensure that you can feel like that you are a descendant of some star being, from another planet, and that's fine and dandy. But if you can't make that work here so that your life is good and that you've created a solid foundation for yourself and for the people around you in a reasonable, logical way, then what good is that information?
Yeah, as I often phrase it to people, can you grow corn with it?
That's right. Grow corn and potatoes. That's what they say in the Sacred Valley. The traditions I'm from are very, and most shamanic traditions actually are very practical. They're mostly from agrarian societies. They're very dependent upon their crops growing due to the relationship they had with the unseen world, due to the relationship they had with the land. They had to have those strong relationships in order to survive, so their crops would grow.
So, when dealing with such potent plant medicine, now, something I've always heard, it's not something I'm experienced in, isn't the initial experience for most people actually rather unpleasant?
Yes. Terence McKenna, and this is why I like Terence McKenna, because of his words, not necessarily his philosophy, but he did say one time that it is not a potent psychedelic experience unless you're absolutely terrified to walk into it. If you're not shaking at the knees, feeling like that you're actually about ready to die, then it's not a psychedelic experience worth having. And that's the way I enter almost every ceremony, whether you use plant medicines or not, because the goal is boundary dissolution. You want to break down those boundaries and those illusions that you have of the world around you every chance that you get, and in a sense die, so that you can be birthed anew. But if someone has a very strong egoic structure that doesn't want to break and they resist the experience, then more often than not, it's very unpleasant.
Well, I mean, and it's not, from a shamanic animistic standpoint, it's not completely in their hands either, no matter what they do. If the spirit decides that you didn't come with the right intent or the right time, or what you really need is to be broken, you will be broken.
Right. And if you're not supposed to be broken either, then that's not what happens either. Right. And that, the one thing that's very interesting about working with San Pedro is that I've been asked multiple times, what is it like? What is it like? I don't think anybody could ever really write a book and truly explain what the experience is like, because it changes every single time. Every time it is a very completely distinct experience from the other. And it's always because it's the particular medicine, and that's when you have a relationship with the spirit. It's delivering a very particular medicine that you need for that time.
So let me ask you this. I've been told stories from people who have tried a particular, not necessarily that medicine, but a particular hallucinogenic plant, and had a personification of a spirit come to them and go, I don't ever want to see you here again. And they decided not to use that particular plant anymore. Now, have you ever seen those experiences where someone was told not to cross this gateway?
Yeah, not with plant medicine per se, personally, but I will actually recount an experience my wife and I had going to Colorado in Ute territory, and we decided to bring our Peruvian mesas to this area of sacred land that was used in pilgrimages for the Ute. This is southern Colorado, and we're up in the mountains, and we get out our mesas thinking, oh, we're totally going to honor the land here. We put down our tobacco and paid homage to the spirits, which is what you do before you set forth in any ceremonial endeavor. And I'm not exactly sure. I don't know if I could recount sequentially exactly what happened that night, but we ended up having a very hard and terrifying experience. And what it resulted in was a spirit coming to us saying, that's fine and dandy that you're wanting to come here and do ceremony, but we don't understand this mesa stuff. This isn't the language that we're used to. So take this stuff, go, get out of here. And that was a huge lesson in that for us, that just because you're taking some kind of shamanic path with you to one part of the country doesn't necessarily mean that the spirits of the land are going to understand it, because they're used to a different type of language. If we had brought our sacred pipes, and our medicine bags, then maybe the experience would have turned out differently. So that's an experience that I've had where we've been turned away by a spirit before. We're not ready.
Honestly, I think that's an important lesson too, because I think people tend to get caught up in our culture and this idea. First of all, as a group, you would have been predetermining that whatever you were going to do was going to be successful. So as a group, to be rejected from that location says you were having a real experience, because that's not what you were priming yourselves for.
Right. And, that's a testament to the entire philosophy and cosmology of most shamanic paradigms, that the land is conscious. It is an animistic experience. It has its own consciousness. It has its own history, and that is dependent upon the history of the people that have lived on that land for generations. And so those, millennia of experiences of the Ute living on that land had way more clout and way more weight than we did, kind of prancing in. With our little bancos and our little artes and cuyas. And we weren't hurt by any means. No harm came to us, but it was the equivalent of a parent slamming their fist down on the table and saying, get out of here with that stuff. It is a good lesson to learn, because one needs to be able to understand that the land that they live on, even if you live in an apartment in the city or in the suburbs, everything is conscious. All land is conscious, no matter if it's urban or in the wild. And you need to understand the consciousness that lives there around you, and establish a relationship with how that land responds to you. Some areas of land may respond well to a certain type of offering than another area of land. So I spend since then I spend a lot of time really trying to relay that to the people that I teach. Pay attention, pay strong attention, and that's where the rapport comes in. That's where an actual relationship comes in with the land, not just seeing a vision of a person whenever you're on a shamanic journey or what have you, but revisiting the same spirit over and over and over again, and paying your pagos, which the pagos are payment, making your offerings and making your payment, showing because that's a language that they understand. Laying down tobacco, making offerings and dispachos. The spirits don't often necessarily communicate through English or through the language that we use. It's kind of beyond telepathy, and it's this other kind of language written in the unseen world. In Peru, and James, you're probably familiar with this term, but in Peru it's called Aini.
Aini, yes.
It's
so, in the final moments would you like to tell the audience how you can be reached and any public appearances that you're doing here soon?
Sure, yeah. So you can reach me at www.danielmollerweb.com. That's actually the home for all of my writing endeavors. If you're interested in reaching me in terms of shamanic apprenticeship, you can go to my wife and I's website, www.lodgeofthepeople.com. And we actually are kind of done with public appearances for a little while because our kids are going back to school and that's our main focus. But in October, we will be starting our next apprenticeship series in the Pachacuti Mesa tradition. It's a year long. It's broken out into 5 weekend intensives, and it is a life-changing experience. It's incredible, and we keep going back to it and doing it over and over again. It's transformation for us. So yeah, thank you.
Well, hey, I want to thank you again for coming out and joining us. Stay on the line. Jim and I will follow up with you here in a minute. I'm going to let the Illuminists take us on out. I will talk to everyone again next week.
Thank you.